Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. Very happy to welcome Dave Schur. He has been a busy, busy man working on Louisville's Constitution. This year ended up being a day, is normally a week of celebration, and we just thought it would be fun to catch up with him. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning.
Perhaps you could let us know how Louisville and the Constitution became so intertwined.
We have a local housewife by the name of Olga T. Weber, who in the early 50s began distributing pamphlets and information on the flag and the Constitution to students in the schools. And on September 17th, Constitution Day in 1952, under the auspices of what was then called the Committee for the Preservation of the Constitution, Olga hosted a gathering of Stark County elected officials at what was then the Louisville High School auditorium on Gorgas Street. And what we continue to do is on Constitution Day have an observance. And in 2000, we were able to erect a historic marker sponsored by the Longaberger Company and the Ohio Bicentennial Commission, Louisville Constitution Day Committee, all contributing funding for that marker, which stands on the site of what was then the Louisville High School. And it's no longer, it's a vacant lot now. It's called the Green Space, and there are various plans for what to do with that in the future. But the historic marker, let's see if I can get to where it reads. We had a lot of people, mayors at the time. Let's see. I'm trying to think as I'm looking here, and it's not working. Can we pause?
Sure, we can pause.
All right, just a moment.
I'll bring it up. Mark head down.
All right. I'll give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1. State Representatives John Lehman and the late Carl Bauer, making September 17th Ohio's Constitution Day, became a resolution was signed by former Governor Frank Lausche in 1953. That information is part of the historical marker. Formerly, we had signs at the, and still have, city limit markers at the main entrances on State Route 44 and State Route 153 coming into town, indicating that this is Constitution Town.
Mm-hmm.
And the marker says that on this site in September 17, 1952, U.S. Congressman Frank T. Bowe spoke to an assembly of individuals concerned with commemorating the completion of the U.S. Constitution on September 17, 1787. That group of citizens went on to press for both state and national observance, which came to fulfillment when then Governor Frank Lausche proclaimed September 17th as Constitution Day in Ohio in 1953. And President Eisenhower proclaimed Constitution Week September 17th through the 23rd in 1955. The committee has continued the observance annually, becoming the nation's oldest continuous observance of Constitution Day.
Wow.
Currently, the Constitution Day observation was held at that same auditorium, and that building, of course, is no longer there. So we generally meet at the middle school auditorium, and one of the very nice features of that program is that we have new citizens wanting to become citizens,
Right.
sworn in by the presiding judge. It's been Taryn Heath in recent years. at that ceremony.
For someone who's not ever attended one of those, tell me a little bit about those and how meaningful they are.
To me, very meaningful because my great-grandfather went through that very same ceremony on
Wow.
September 1st of 1880, coming from Germany as a refugee from the Kaiser's army. But it was the very first one, and every one I've attended, I become very emotional over it because of my great-grandfather. And all the new citizens-to-be are assembled on stage. A group of musicians from the Louisville Band are there to play patriotic music. We have usually the essay contest winners, which we didn't do the essay contest this year either because the kids were not in school,
Right.
and a speaker. And the essay contest winners read their compositions. And then the judge gets involved and goes through the ceremony of reading the information that the potential citizens had to learn to become citizens.
Right. Before that day, give us an idea of what all they needed to accomplish in order to stand there that day.
Well, they needed to know more about the Constitution than what a lot of people know.
Yes.
The division of the three branches of the government, legislative, judicial, and administrative, and the checks and balances between them, and requirements of being able to speak and understand English, and there are so many, and I can't.
Yes. I've heard I heard an elected official say this, that we need to remember there are three branches of government for the balance of powers. And this is what he said: the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Completely forgetting that there's a Supreme Court.
Oh, my.
I know.
Yeah,
And this
yeah.
was someone, a high elected official.
Yeah.
And yeah, you are absolutely right. We need to know it. We shouldn't be able to vote until we know a little bit more about what our country is based on, founded on, the rule of law. And those men were geniuses who put this all together.
Yes, they were, and they were reviled by some during the composition of the Constitution, that they were a group of demagogues, or they were very rich men who were trying to make a living for themselves, and also to form a government which was going to be very favorable to them and their enterprises. But there was one man there, Benjamin Franklin, who at 81 years old had very little to gain by
Right.
giving up of his time, but he was very intelligent in a lot of areas, and at one point in the proceedings he asked that since they were not making much progress, that they ought to consider having a minister come in and have a prayer before the sessions. But the group kind of vetoed that because they had the doors all closed, windows closed. This was in May, June, July, August, and early September in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I have been in Philadelphia during July, and it is a terribly humid, uncomfortable area to be in. And then to be locked in a room with 55 people
Yeah.
trying to debate the core of what has become our Constitution had to be a really debilitating thing for these gentlemen.
Yeah.
And there is a very interesting editorial in the repository of Friday that said we need to be keeping the Constitution and go back to the original intent and the original meaning of the words, instead of having judges interpret it and say that, well, it means this now as opposed to
Yes.
what it meant then.
Yes, yes.
Those men knew what they were doing, and they set up a framework for us to abide by. And all the changes that have happened, and one that I personally kind of disagree with, although it really is a minor thing, they set up that the election of senators was to be by the state legislatures, so that those senators represented the states. We now elect senators directly.
Right.
So the state legislatures, who knew the qualifications of the men who were attempting to become U.S. senators, was known by those people. We as electors now are very unfamiliar with the people who are running for office. We don't know their background. We don't know their philosophy of life and government. And that's my objection to that particular change. But there have been other changes through the years that just don't make sense.
You know, Dave,
compared with-
we see the painting, and it all looks very civil, but it was a little contentious, wasn't it, as they hammered this all out?
Oh, it sure was. And one of the things that was representation. Some wanted the bigger states wanted population to be the core of the legislature. And the smaller states wanted equal representation. And what became known as the Connecticut Compromise set up the House as represented by population and the Senate 2 for each state.
Yes.
And that took up several weeks of debate and discussion. And one of the other factors that was really debated and was how they were going to count the slaves. The South wanted to count them for representation, but did not want to count them for taxation. And that took several weeks of contentious bickering.
Did the idea of, as you're talking about freedom for all people, did the idea of abolishing slavery come up at that point? Because wouldn't we have been able to avoid a lot of pain in later years?
Well, there were a lot of abolitionists in the North who wanted to do away with it long before the Constitution was debated.
And I seem to remember people who even were slave owners. I seem to remember reading somewhere, or correct me if I'm wrong, that Thomas Jefferson or someone wanted to abolish it, wrote about abolishing it, even though at the time they were practicing it, which is kind of hard to get your head wrapped around.
Jefferson had slaves.
Yes.
Washington had slaves. John Adams, who was an avowed abolitionist, had slaves.
And that might be who
they
I'm
didn't
thinking
call
of.
them slaves; they called them servants in the home. But
Yeah, not a,
basically
yeah,
the same thing,
semantics, yes.
Yeah, right. But I've got a copy of the Constitution here on my wall in the basement. It's a satin finished thing, and I was looking for the part that said about the states. And I'm not finding it.
Oh, that's all right. You're a wealth of information. Can we just drop by and take a look at that? Because that sounds pretty cool. I'm looking at the clock. We do need to take a short break. We're visiting with Dave Shore, talking all about the Constitution today. You're listening to Our Community. Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with Dave Shore, talking about the Constitution, because are you the chairman of the Constitution Committee in Louisville?
No, I had been president of the Constitution Day Committee back in the bicentennial years of 1987 through 1991. And I was the first president who served more than 2 terms.
Well, you seem to be the go-to guy. That's what I'm told. You know, if you want to know about it, you talk to Dave Shore. One of the things I think that has become a bit of a controversial topic is the Electoral College. Was that set up in our Constitution?
Yes, it definitely was.
Can you talk about that and why that's important, or why that when people are saying, hey, shouldn't it just be majority rule? Talk to me about that.
Well, majority rule is democracy. And democracy leads to various other not very pleasant ways of governing. Let's see.
So we do not really have a democracy. What do we have?
We have a republic. And a lady asked Benjamin Franklin as he exited the convention, "What have you given us, a republic or a democracy?" And Benjamin Franklin said, "We have a republic if you can keep it."
If you can keep it.
Yes.
Ooh, did he explain? I hope she said, what do you mean by that? And he gave a follow-up. But that's all we know as far as that conversation?
From what I have read, they...
I would have wanted to do a follow-up question there.
Yeah, I have a book that I don't have it with me here in the basement. It's up in my room where I do a lot of my reading. But pardon me a moment. The convention, as you mentioned, was very contentious, and that voting thing was one of them. They didn't want the popular election of the presidency to be by popular vote only, by the majority of the votes.
And why is that?
They wanted it, that's a democracy, where everybody votes. They wanted the republic, which is people electing officials to do for them. In other words, bringing it down to maybe a local level. We have city council people, or we have back then the Burgesses of Virginia, the state senate. Those are people we elected to do for us.
To do our voting for us.
You're voting for those people to do what needs to be done, rather than have everybody in a city come to a grand meeting and try to vote on what needs to be done. It can't be done. And maybe electronically now we could do it, but back at that time, you couldn't get everybody together at the same time to vote on doing anything without a lot more contention than what we find going on currently.
Because I hear everywhere that all politics is local. So what I'm hearing you say is that if we were to just say majority rules, then those people, those areas that have the highest density of population would pretty much carry the vote, and it would ignore the local concerns of people in maybe less populous areas. Am I understanding it right?
Yes.
Okay.
And there would be a lot of division, even without population considerations. You have farmers and you have industry.
Right.
Jefferson was one who wanted what they called an agrarian society, where it was just farmers. And if we stayed with his idea, we'd be all farmers, and we wouldn't have industry, and we wouldn't have the inventions that have taken place.
That's so interesting, because he was an inventor.
He was, very much so, but he was inventing mostly for his farm.
So interesting.
Monticello.
Why? Oh, and it's beautiful. Why is it important to understand our Constitution, to know our Constitution, and to understand? It seems like young people just throw out the idea of an electoral college altogether. Why is it important for us to understand their meaning and their hard work that went into framing this?
Well, if you don't understand the Constitution and don't know what it meant at the time, you accept all these things that have changed over the years that are changing this country from a republic to a democracy or to socialism.
Do you see that as a natural path?
Democracy and socialism kind of blend together. And I think some of the things that are happening in this country now are a result of ignoring what the original intent of the Constitution was and it should be.
Have they been taught it? Because it sounds like, did you say back in remind me the year that Louisville got started really recognizing this and really emphasizing it in the education of its young people. But I don't know that others...
1950s.
In the 50s. I don't know that other schools did that, did they?
Well, I know that Olga Weber was very persistent in giving out the information on the flag and the Constitution, and we as a committee used to present the classes, and I couldn't tell you for sure what age groups, but the classes who were studying either American history or government would receive a copy of the Constitution, compliments of the Constitution Day Committee. Now, we still have, or did up until this year, an essay contest which asked the students to write on a particular theme which had a tie to the Constitution. At one point, we took the preamble of the Constitution and broke it down into 7 different phrases and had them write essays on those phrases. And
now, this is 50 years ago, but I'm thinking of myself going through high school. We memorized the preamble, but I don't know that we ever actually read the Constitution. Or maybe I was supposed to and I didn't.
Yeah.
But I think at some point as an adult, we all need to get ourselves a copy of that and see what's in it.
Yes. One of the really interesting things was there was so much contention even once the Constitution was in final written form for signing it. There were 55 delegates that had been assembled there. Out of 87 who were named to be delegates, only 55 attended. And of those 55, only 39 actually signed the Constitution. The other ones refused to sign it for one reason or another. So it came to the point where, for instance, New York had 3 delegates. Alexander Hamilton was one of them.
Yes.
And I'm looking here at New York. Roger Sherman was the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another one who had left earlier, refused to take part any further in it.
So I can't imagine.
The Constitution was, and this is a quote from what I'm reading off of this Constitution in front of me, was done in convention by the unanimous consent of the states present the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1787, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 12th. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names, and then all the names are listed there.
But not everybody signed.
Not everybody signed.
Was that
and
because
not
they didn't?
everybody was in favor of it.
Okay, I wondered, did they not agree about it? So that's very interesting.
Well, then it went to ratification in the States, and there was a lot of discussion about not having a Bill of Rights.
Oh, my goodness.
And Madison said there's no need, at one point during the convention, said that there's no need for a Bill of Rights because the Constitution lays out what they can do. And if it's not there, the last article says that not the last article, but the one, Article 6, says that everything that is not delegated to the federal government is reserved to the states or the people.
Mm-hmm.
And he used that phrase to indicate that we don't need a Bill of Rights. But then when the states began the ratification process, several were opposed to the Constitution without a Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And would only approve it if there were a Bill of Rights appended to it. And he switched horses and became an advocate for a Bill of Rights and was one who offered several
Oh,
the
there
Bill
you
of
go.
Rights. I think there were like 15 offered to begin with, and we ended
Interesting.
up with 10.
Right. And you think, I mean, that is what I know of the Constitution. I can talk about the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and so forth. The original document, I don't know that I would be as familiar with. I am familiar with the Bill of Rights and those First Amendments and so forth. This is so fascinating. Tell me again, Louisville next year in a normal world, which I believe is coming, what do you normally do and what can we look forward to as part of a celebration normally?
Well, usually if it would have been normal this year, on the 13th, which would have been Sunday last, we would have had a choir presentation by the Louisville Community Choir, which would have included both patriotic and religious music, as well as songs from Broadway and the movies and the Great American Songbook and various other sources.
Broadway? Do they do Hamilton?
No, they don't do
Oh, okay.
plays. They just
They sing
have a
songs
musical
from-
presentation, which will include.
Anything
Oh,
from Hamilton?
great. I don't know that they have ever. Not yet, anyway.
That has brought it popular again to young people. If anybody,
Yes.
if something is going to make them go, I think I want to know more about these guys, thank goodness we've got that.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'd want to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then on Monday is usually a prayer breakfast, and that usually takes place at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then in the afternoon and evening, they have a rehearsal for the Queen's pageant, which comes up later in the week.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday is usually, they used to have a Queen's Ball, and I don't know whether that's going to continue or not. And at that point, they would name a prince and princess for On the Float. On the 16th, the Rotary Club of Louisville sponsors a dinner at one of the churches. Excuse me. That's the Constitution banquet.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rotary Club sponsors a Citizen of the Year and is named on that date. And I'm very proud to have been named a Citizen of the Year in
Congratulations.
1987.
Nice.
Yeah. And then on Thursday is generally the Queen's pageant at the middle school auditorium in the evening. Friday we don't do anything because that's football night.
Of course. Of course.
Saturday evening was what they called Music in Motion, was a band show, band competition. We'd have bands coming in from various places, usually 8 or 9 different bands coming in from sometimes all over the country, coming in and putting on the band competition in the football stadium. And then Sunday was the Grand Parade.
Yes. Well, we will pray that 2021 will bring all of these events back. And in the meantime, we really appreciate your dedication to all of this. Dave Shore, thank you for everything you've done for our community.
All right. Thank you very much, Susie.